the Praetor Suit. The Doom Slayer's iconic, indestructible armor. I said, indestructible. Okay, almost indestructible suit of armor. But even more interesting than the unique design or the developer's process of designing it is the suit's history and lore throughout the modern Doom timeline. Let's get into it. We start back on planet Earth, where the Doomguy was a soldier for presumably the United States government, but what country the Doomslayer is from is unconfirmed in the current timeline. But let's be honest, Doomguy is about as American as it gets. However, when his superior officer told him to fire into a crowd of unarmed civilians, Doomguy proceeded to beat the shit out of him. As punishment, the Doom Marine was sent to the United Aerospace Corporation, or the UAC's, Mars facility, for which he was given the first of his suits, the classic Doom 1 armor. The suit had a thick, padded chest piece, knee pads, long black boots, gloves, and a heavy-looking ventilated helmet with a green visor. On the Red Planet, Doomguy is sent on an expedition through a portal to Hell, and ends up trapped inside the dimension of demons. In order to survive, the Doom Marine had to fight through hordes of demons, slaughtering them by the dozens with murderous rage. Over years, centuries, eons, the Slayer brutalized demons across the realm of fire. Time in other dimensions passes far differently, so it's practically impossible to calculate how long he was truly inside Hell. Eventually, he encountered a powerful demon known as the Resurrector, also called the Mother Demon. This particular resident of Hell realized the Doomguy would never stop his battle against the demons, and, in her final moments, cast the Slayer from Hell, across time, space, and dimensions. It's hard to say whether or not he ended up in his original universe, but I believe he simply went into the future of his original reality. Sometime later, the Slayer awoke, no longer in the belly of Hell, but on the lush planet of Argent. It was the home of the Argenta, a humanoid race of technologically advanced warriors. They lived in a feudal, almost medieval system. They originally worshipped the elemental wraiths, almighty godlike beings that granted them the power that fueled their technologically advanced society. Eventually, the wraiths fell into an endless slumber, abandoning the Argentans. However, they could still harness the wraiths' energy to create and advance their tech. That is, until the angelic makers, led by the Khan Maker, arrived from their interdimensional home of Urdak and granted the Argenta even greater power, such as intergalactic travel. The Argentan creed of knights, the Night Sentinels, were a powerful group of loyal warriors dedicated to guarding the elemental wraiths and defending the Argentan people. When the Sentinels found the Slayer outside the castle gates of the holy city of Sentinel Prime, covered in the bloody wounds of battle, they took him in. They saw his conviction and anger, and by Sentinel tradition, decided to test him by putting him in a hand-to-hand combat arena with other possible Sentinel recruits. The Doom Marine found himself victorious in the Colosseum, and the Sentinels made him an honorary member of their army, alongside other common soldiers and rehabilitated prisoners of war. But one dark, cloudy day, everything changed on the planet of Argent when Hell itself began to bring ruin to their planet. Red, fiery gates of dark magic began to open across the surface of their world, and hateful, grotesque creatures born of evil incarnate poured from the portals. The Doom Marine was first on the front lines and fought back the demons with ravenous fury, taking pleasure in the massacre of the unholy abominations. Hours later, the battle was won, and the demons were pushed back to whence they came. But the Sentinels were so impressed with the Doomguy's might on the battlefield that their priests personally invited the Slayer to be an official Knight Sentinel, breaking their code, the first arena-born warrior to be an official Sentinel. The Slayer accepted and was knighted in the Temple of Sentinel Prime. He was granted a traditional knightly garb with heavy green-plated boots, a half chest piece, and a gated helmet, this unique armor was not the simple ceremonial armor of a Sentinel foot soldier, but the durable gear of a high-ranking warrior. However, this armor seems to offer little in the way of practical defense, as the armor's plates don't even cover most vital organs. This is probably to allow a lot more breathability and flexibility on the battlefield. I still love the design of this armor, the classic green color, the metallic accents, and the cool red energy receptacle. The fact that this armor is medieval and knightly, as opposed to all the other sci-fi space marine armors Doomguy wears, made this the armor I wore all through my first Doom Eternal playthrough. Moving on, the Doomslayer continued to train and fight with the Sentinels, traveling over the galaxy with them, and even returning to Hell itself on 3 separate expeditions. But one day, the demons struck at the city of Taurus Nabad, home of the Divinity Machine. The Divinity Machine was the test created by Maker and Argentine scholars in order to find the Chosen One, a person destined to destroy the Makers and end the rule of the Dark Lord in Hell. Powered by the Dark Lord's energy, it was meant to incinerate any and all who went through it, and any who were subjected to the machine's wrath were ripped apart, atom by atom, in excruciating pain. Many Sentinels went through the test, but none were proven to be the foretold Chosen One. The Night Sentinels were called in to stop the invasion of their city, but the hordes of Hell's forces were seemingly unstoppable. Knights fell by the dozen as the swarm of creatures overtook the unprepared Sentinel army. The city was crumbling under the foot of darkness, and all hope seemed lost. Deep in the chambers of Taurus Nabad, the Doomslayer was pulled by combat by a hooded figure, a mysterious being cloaked in red. This was Samur Maker, better known as the Seraphim. The Seraphim led the Doomguy into the chambers of the Divinity Machine. Samur turned to the machine's controls and reversed its polarity. Now any who went into it would be granted the raw, ancient power of Davoth, the Dark Lord, the creator of Hell. The Doom Marine stepped into the hold of the machine.
Take it. It will give you strength. Help you on your journey. And now, they will fear you.
As the chamber filled with blinding white light, the Seraphim smiled as he realized they had finally found the Chosen One. Out on the battlefield, the Sentinels continued to wage furious war against Hell's army, but to little avail. It seemed as though the city of Taurus Nabad was all but lost. Then, from the mist of the city, came a lone figure. Gravity itself seemed to bend towards him. A chill went down the spines of all, human and demon alike, at a mere glance at this man in the shadows. Rising like a dark phoenix from the ashes of Hell, the legend of the Doom Slayer was forged in the crucible of Taurus Nabad. The Slayer leapt from the peak of the highest building of the city, fiery blade in hand. He plunged his sword into the chest of the Dreadnought, one of the most powerful titans in existence. The colossal beast fell at the feet of the Slayer, and the demons knew their cause was lost. The Night Sentinels, led by the newly empowered Doomslayer, massacred the Unholy horde with ease. The demons retreated, slithering back into the portals from which they came, forked tails between their legs. The Sentinels turned back to see the man who had saved their lives, their way of life. It was their own comrade, The Outlander, the Doomguy. But he had changed. He was strong, stronger than a mountain. He was fast, unbelievably fast, like a bolt of lightning crashing through a thunderstorm. And he was practically indestructible, blades clashing off his flesh like plastic on a diamond. The Sentinel King at the time, King Novik, and the Conmaker realized that they had great power in their hands. The Doomslayer might be the most powerful being alive, and they used him to his full potential. Being the weapon of the Sentinels and the Makers, they needed to give the Slayer an upgraded set of armor. Forged by Sentinel blacksmiths and enhanced with alien Maker technology, the Dark Ages armor was born. Now, we have very little on the lore and the creation of this armor and its purpose, but I can definitively say that this is easily one of the best suits of armor the Doomguy has ever worn. The thick chest plate, the heavy spiked shoulder pads, the plated leg armor, and the silver and red accents are all incredible. This suit also showcases that the energy receptacle on his chest is also a port for locking into the Atlan mech the Doomslayer piloted during the Dark Ages. Not even mentioning the fur cape that makes the Doomslayer look like a fucking barbarian. However, this armor seems to be less flexible, trading speed for brute defense, more suitable for a valuable weapon of war you wouldn't want to die in combat. I would say it's more for hand-to-hand combat, melee fighting. Can't wait to see more of this armor in the new Doom game coming out next year. Years later, a schism started to erupt amongst the Argenta. The Makers, once a benevolent force of light on Argent, started to become corrupt from the influence of the Dark Lord. Davoth promised the Makers infinite energy in exchange for their allegiance. The Conmaker, now fully corrupt and willing, agreed to the terms. The Argenta were split in twain, those loyal to the Sentinel Code and their king, and those who followed the Makers in pursuit of power. The Argentan priests, the Order of Dags, became hellified wizards, now called Hell Priests of the Deagic Council. The Sentinels who followed the Makers and Hell's rule were put inside the divinity machine after death, becoming hateful, monstrous, demonic warriors called Marauders. The Slayer, of course, stayed true to his king and his brethren. They battled the traitors, but unfortunately, the war lasted little time. One Night Sentinel leader, a commander named Valen, had lost his son in a tragic accident. Desperate, the man made a deal with the corrupt hell priest, Deagic, to resurrect his son in return for allowing the demons into the city where the Sentinels stayed. The priest accepted, and Valen gave the Unholy wizard his son's broken body. Deagic began to return his son to life, but Valen could only watch in abject horror as his son was transformed into a grotesque, unholy creature. The priest had brought the commander's son back to life, all right, as a titanic demon. The most powerful demon aside from the Dark Lord himself, the icon of sin. The commander had betrayed his kin for nothing. Deagic cast him from his chambers, and Valen the betrayer would live the rest of his days in solitude, unforgiven for his sins against the Night Sentinels. As the sun set over the blue skies of Argent, the last bastion of the Sentinels was still, knights and warriors asleep in their beds. But as the Sentinels slept, the demons rose. Thundering steps shook the earth as swaths of demons rushed into the city where the last Night Sentinels lay. Breaking through walls and gates, the people ran, but it was too late. It was far too late. The Sentinels held off the monsters as long as they could, but when the icon of sin, Valen's own son, Arrived at the castle walls, it was already over. The mere presence of the Titan caused reality itself to warp and crack. And as the futile battle came to a close, the gargantuan icon used its immense power to teleport large chunks of Argent into hell, including corrupting the sleeping wraiths that had given the Argentans their power in the first place, and using their ancient abilities to create a massive well of energy, one so large it went through realities. When the dust settled in hell, all was quiet. The fight was over. The last loyal Knights Sentinels had lost the civil war, and the remaining warriors back home went into hiding deep in the trenches of Argent, fearing retribution from the Makers. From the ruins of the city, the Doomslayer rose, broken and beaten. His armor was damaged, his spirit splintered, and his brothers dead. He was alone in a dimension of pure evil and darkness. The Slayer, filled with immense rage and anger, launched back into the fray of battle. He waged war against the armies of hell, fighting harder than ever before. He ripped and tore with furious fervor, and the demons wrote tales and testaments to his name. The Doom Slayer, the only one they feared. Along his path of relentless destruction, the Slayer's ceremonial sentinel armor became so battered and ruined that it was practically falling off him. Soon thereafter, he encountered a being known as the Wretch. The Wretch is a figure in Doom mythology that has very, very little known information about them, aside from their name. All that is known is that the Wretch is a being of hell, and that they found favor with the Slayer and built him a new suit of armor, a nearly indestructible shroud of metal, forged of the iron of hell. It was sleek yet heavy, strong yet nimble. The Praetor Suit we see in Doom 2016 is the same armor the mysterious Wretch built in the womb of hell. Many theories about the Wretch's identity have been thrown around, but my personal favorite is that the Wretch was a member of the UAC that was experimented on and banished to hell when the experiment failed. This would explain the suit's human-looking design and its militaristic aspects. The Wretch Praetor is an armored spacesuit, and it seems to trade flexibility for strength and force. However, despite the armor's great strengths and durability, when it does get damaged, it takes quite a toll on the suit's overall health. A fair time later, the demons, tired of the unending slaughter by their greatest enemy, conspired to get rid of him for as long as possible. They lured the Slayer into the catacombs of the Blood Keep, and, blinded by the hunt, the Slayer only realized his folly when it was far too late. The Deagic Council brought the Temple of the Cadanger Sanctum on top of the Slayer, rendering him unconscious. The demons lifted his body from the rubble and placed it into a stasis sarcophagus. Priests marked the lid of the sarcophagus with a demonic symbol, the mark of the beast. It translates to, "Do not open, death lies inside." They sealed the door of the tomb and prayed the door would never open again. The sanctum could hold him for all time, if they were lucky. Then of course comes the events of Doom 2016, which begins with the cyborg Samuel Hayden freeing the Slayer from the Cadanger Sanctum after Dr. Olivia Pierce activated a hell wave that allowed the demons onto the Mars facility and turned 80% of the staff into zombies. Throughout the Slayer's journey, he finds an ancient demonic relic called the Crucible and uses it to close the well of energy on Mars that the Icon of Sin created when it destroyed Argent. As it turns out, the UAC had been using the well to create an infinite power source for Earth called Argent Energy. After a long battle against the demonically transformed Olivia Pierce, the Slayer returns to Mars. Hayden, not trusting the Slayer to end his pursuit of the destruction of Argent energy, steals the Crucible and betrays Doomguy by throwing him through a portal back to hell.
I am not the villain in this story. I do what I do because there is no choice.
Rerouting tether coordinates complete.
Our time is up. I can't kill you, but I won't have you standing in our way. Until we see each other again.
How Doomguy escaped hell without an interdimensional tether is unknown, but we can assume he used a portal through the Fortress of Doom, a massive mobile Sentinel flagship which he recovered from the remains of the Argent kingdom found in hell. The Slayer, bruised from his battles in hell, spent 14 short years in his fortress, traveling the galaxy and preparing for war against the armies of hell. As Doomguy wandered the empty cosmos in his castle of solitude, he took to repairing the battered armor the wretch had given him all those years ago. Using powerful Sentinel technology and pieces of his old suit, he constructed the final, strongest iteration of the Praetor Suit, the most powerful, indestructible armor in the entire universe. The Slayer crafted a wrist-mounted doom blade, forged of unbreakable metals and able to cut through flesh and bone with ease. His gauntlets had energy receptacles to consume and convert hell energy into a deadly strike he called the Blood Punch. On his shoulder, an equipment launcher, a device that spews fire, throws grenades, and freezes enemies with explosive projectiles of ice. His armor was far more durable as well, being resistant to extremely high temperatures. You may see a key difference in the Eternal Praetor and the Wretch Praetor suits, and that's the Doomslayer's exposed biceps on his new suit. Where the hell would Doomguy remove such vital chunks of his armor? My theory is flexibility and comfort. The lack of bicep armor probably allows for greater range of motion with his arms, letting him swing on bars, grab onto walls, and use his weapons more easily. It's also very similar to his original marine armor from his time on Mars, which we know he still loved, or at least cared enough for, to lock it behind a sealed door in what is clearly a place of honor in the Fortress of Doom. This new armor has heavy omnidirectional booster boots that can launch Doomguy in any direction, spinal augmentation, a leather utility belt, and a sealed helmet to protect against the empty vacuum of space. After building the Eternal Praetor, the Slayer returns to Earth after receiving a distress signal where the globe has been attacked by Hell's forces and few survivors remain. And at this point, we reach the beginning of Doom Eternal. Throughout the Slayer's conquest to destroy the demons forever by killing the Dark Lord, he encounters many deadly beings and slaughters them one after one. He kills all 3 Hell Priests and a powerful Sentinel Gladiator. Doomguy then arrives at Urdak, home of the Makers. When the Slayer arrives, the Khan Maker awakens the dormant icon of sin. But the Slayer breaks her control from it by destroying Valen's son's heart using a knife the Betrayer had given him while on the search for the Hell Priests. The Slayer meets the Khan before reaching the gate to Earth, and finally ends her, bringing the rule of the Great Makers at a close, just as foretold. Doomguy leaps through the portal and finds himself on Earth once more, where the Icon of Sin awaits, the greatest threat the Doomslayer has ever faced. The mountainous demon faced the Slayer with unyielding hatred, vileness and evil coursing through its veins. But the anger the Titan felt was no match for the pure fury of the Doomslayer. Needless to say, the battle was short. The Slayer easily ripped apart the Titan's armor and leapt on its head, plunging the blade of his crucible deep into the demon's skull. The Titan fell with a thunderous crash, and the Slayer walked away with blood on his hands and a gleam in his eye. And even after facing these insurmountable threats, the Slayer's armor remained intact without a single scratch. But Doomguy's quest was far from over. He would not rest until every last demon's blood was spilled onto the soil. And as we enter the story of Doom Eternal's DLC, The Ancient Gods, it's important to note that the Slayer still wears the armor. It's important to note that the Slayer still wears the same armor as in the base game, which is rather unfortunate because they had an opportunity to at least upgrade his suit cosmetically. But nevertheless, we continue. The Slayer first had to resurrect the Dark Lord, who had only been in spiritual form for over decillion years, never even seen in a physical body. Doomguy first had to bring back his most ancient ally, a person who had given him strength in a time of desperation, Samur Maker, the Seraphim. After freeing the Seraphim from his stasis on the UAC's Atlantica facility, he merges Samuel Hayden's consciousness with the Seraphim's. Samuel was the Seraphim, the ancient Maker's consciousness inside a cyborg body in order to lead humanity to Argent energy. This, in my opinion, was a very lame reveal. It kind of ruined Samuel Hayden as a character. Instead of being a brilliant man who cheated death by building a cyborg body, he's a completely different character who we already knew about? Okay. The Seraphim was the right hand of the Father, the god of the Doom universe, who supposedly created everything. But this is actually a lie. Davoth, the Dark Lord, was the first being. He created the universe, everything, including hell. Hell, or Jihad as it was first named, was meant to be a paradise, a virtual heaven of sorts. But when the Father and the Makers discovered the secret of immortality, they feared giving it to Davoth. Instead, they betrayed him, ruining his paradise and corrupting his power, turning him from a loving being into the Dark Lord. Moving on, the Slayer reaches the blood swamps of hell, completing the trial of Malagog to find the Dark Lord's life sphere. The oldest titan in existence, Malagog lifted the Slayer to the blood swamp's peak, where the life spheres of both the Father and Davoth resided. The Slayer picked up the Father's life sphere, the most powerful being in existence, the god of his world, and he crushed it between his fingers. This act severed the connection between the Seraphim and the Father, causing Samur's power to rapidly transform him into a grotesque, distorted version of himself. The Slayer then picked up the Dark Lord's life sphere and left the swamps of hell to return to the broken world of Urdak. Inside Urdak, Doomguy walks through a portal into the Equestrian Holt, the place where a life sphere can be used to resurrect any being in existence. Sadly, the transmogrified Samur cut off the Slayer from the Chamber of Resurrection, and the Doom Marine had no choice but to cut down the Seraphim's life. The ancient Maker stood no chance against Doomguy, who dispatched Samur with a rough battle. The Slayer gave the Makers Davoth's life sphere, and the Dark Lord of Hell, the creator of the universe, was brought to life once more. As the light faded from the glowing figure, the Slayer stared into the eyes of himself. It was him in their world, a dark reflection of the Doom Slayer, one born of fire and brimstone. Davoth, the Dark Lord had risen once again. After Davoth teleported away, the Slayer knew he had to confront him in the birthplace of Hell to defeat him in ritual combat so the demons could be extinguished forever. Returning to Argent to claim an energy crystal, the Slayer traveled across green hills and abandoned cities, activating the Torch of Kings to hitch a ride on an ice dragon called a Wintherin. The flying beast took him to the World's Spear, a massive gemstone piercing the planet from end to end. After retrieving the crystal from inside the spear, Doomguy goes back to Earth, civilization still reeling from the demonic invasion just years prior. Using the Argent power crystal, the Slayer activates the Gate of Devoom, the only portal able to travel into Imora, the Dark Lord's home city in the oldest, most ancient part of Hell. When the Slayer arrived through the portal, he was alone, one man against the armies of Hell. But as the Slayer stood, taking in his surroundings while scores of demons rushed toward him, there was a change in the air. And suddenly, from the mist of the mountainside, opened dozens upon dozens of glowing blue portals. Ships and mechs, kings and warriors, fallen comrades of the Slayer from a time before. The betrayer, Valen, had rallied the last remaining Night Sentinels to fight with the Slayer in the last stand against Hell. The Doomslayer battled his way through the winding mountains, launched himself through the castle walls, and walked into the Dark Lord's sanctum at the height of Davoth's tower. It was the fight to end all fights. The final stand between the Slayer and the Dark Lord was a clash felt through dimensions. Every punch landed. Every bullet fired sent shockwaves throughout the universe. Their blades clashed with mighty hits, sparks flying as they stabbed and chopped and brutalized each other. Davoth fought with mighty, ancient prowess, but the Slayer was stronger, faster, smarter. The Doom Marine landed blow after blow, fists crunching into Davoth's mech, bullets raining against the Dark Lord's suit, chipping his armor piece by piece till the demon could no longer walk. And as the battle came to a close, the Dark Lord of Hell had one final request.
Before you strike him down. No.
But when the Dark Lord fell, so did the Slayer. When Davoth died, all under his control perished. Due to the Slayer's connection to the Dark Lord's power, he collapsed when Davoth died. The Seraphs, ancient makers, sealed the Slayer in a new sarcophagus in the clouds of Hell's blood swamps, lying dormant until the universe needs the Doomslayer's aid once more. As written in one of the Korak's tablet entries, may the blood on your sword never dry, and may we never need you again. So that's the history and lore of the Praetor Suit and the Doom timeline. What's your favorite armor? Was there anything I missed? Comment below. I've never really made a video like this before, so if it performs well, I might do another one. Anyways, I hope you all have an awesome day. Adios.